It's all about the Eagles at the moment. Alex, it's time for us to get to know our opponent.
It's very, very important that you know your opponent heading into this Week 2 matchup. A lot of questions about the Eagles, a lot of things to know about this team, and a great person on here to talk about it.
Yeah, 100%. We went and got a Eagles correspondent, somebody that understands the game inside and out. I'm looking forward to a great conversation where we can get into all the keys that the 49ers need to know, 49ers fans need to know about what to watch on Sunday. This game is going to be a lot more interesting than I think we ever thought, because the Eagles had themselves one heck of a game against the Falcons, and some of the things they were successful at are things the 49ers are struggling with, and some of the areas where the 49ers have injuries, the Eagles can be successful with. So this is going to be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
And now we got Bill from the Legal Hands to the Face podcast. Bill, how are you doing, good sir? How excited are you about Week 2?
Oh, man, we're fired up here in Philadelphia. You know, we love our Eagles in this town. I'm sure you guys love your 49ers in San Francisco, but we have a lot of good sports teams here, but the Eagles are always number one at the top of the list. This is a football town, no doubt about it, and a big win last week against Atlanta. So everybody's on the bandwagon now. Everybody's excited about this team.
As they should be. They should be. It was a nice win. Look, there's a lot of questions for the 49ers in the defensive back room. And I would say one of the big things that didn't get tested last week was the cornerback room, because the wide receiving core for the Lions, it is what it is, right? There's only so much they're going to exactly. There's only so much they're going to be able to do. That isn't the case this week. You got a lot of young, fast, speedy, talented wideouts. Jalen Hurts, big arm, lively arm, and also just mobile, right? He can create and extend, which is always a problem for San Francisco. They see this nonstop in the NFC West constantly. How do you think the Eagles wide receivers are going to fare against these 49ers DBs?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, they're a young group, a really young group. And a lot of people in this town are excited about them. The coaching staff's excited about them because they're fast. One of the things Howie Roseman, the general manager, said a couple of years ago that they wanted to do is they wanted to get quicker on the outside. And they did it. I mean, they drafted Jalen Reagor last year, had a little bit of an up and down season last year. He wasn't healthy in training camp. I don't think he ever was able to fully get acclimated, but he's your second year receiver. Then they have Devonta Smith, that I'm sure all of you guys know, won the Heisman Trophy last year, dominated the SEC. From all reports coming out of training camp, this guy does not look like a rookie. He looks like a seasoned veteran, and he proved it last week against Atlanta. 6 catches, 71 yards. First catch ever is a touchdown pass. So this guy looks smooth, man. He's really probably their number one wide receiver. I think he got the most reps at wideout. But there's another guy in that wide receiver room now, Quez Watkins. So he's going into his second year. Didn't really do much last year. He had a couple of nice plays, a couple of nice bursts that you saw. He's fast. He had a big touchdown in the preseason this year, but everybody's excited about Quez Watkins. So, you got those 3 wide receivers, but you also can't talk about the Eagles wide receivers without mentioning their tight ends. Everybody probably knows Zach Ertz. He was a Super Bowl hero in 2017 for the Eagles. He's been a guy who's put up a lot of catches, a lot of yardage, but they also have another good tight end, Dallas Goedert. So you throw those 3 wide receivers with the speed they have, with the other 2 tight ends, Ertz and Goddard. If you have a banged up secondary in San Francisco, it could be a long Sunday afternoon, or at least that's what we're hoping here in Philadelphia.
I would say that's fair. That's fair.
And you know what? Quez Watkins was all over my radar last year in the draft, so I'm kind of excited to see him play, even though I really don't want him to have any success this week. I'm going to be honest. But he's so dynamic in the return game as well. He can do all that stuff. But what do you think? Do you think that's going to be a real problem? Those speed guys on the outside against, possibly Josh Norman, and some of these older corners for the 49ers. Do you think those guys can really take advantage of the speed? Because when we watched a lot of the film, it was a lot of checkdowns from Jalen Hurts. Are they going to be able to take advantage of the 49ers down the field? I think that's what I'm most interested in your take on this. Can they do that? Can they get those wide receivers down the field? Can they get enough time for Jalen Hurts where he can get the ball down the field, or is that something he's going to do?
Yeah, I know it's tough to tell, because last week against Atlanta, they really just took what Atlanta was giving them. Atlanta took all the long balls out of play. So they never took a shot over the top. You're right. A lot of stuff was check downs. They ran a lot of wide receiver screens, and they just moved the ball methodically down the field. But if you listen to Nick Sirianni, the head coach for the Eagles, talk throughout the preseason, I do think that's one of the plans they have, is to try to get the ball down the field to these speedy wide receivers. Whether they can do it or not, it's still kind of a question that needs to be answered because we didn't see it last week, but they didn't have to. But I'd be shocked if they don't take some shots this week. Especially you hit the nail on the head earlier as well, talking about Jalen Hurts' ability to extend plays. I think that's going to be really necessary this week. You guys have, I don't have to tell you, Bosa's a beast, man. I love that guy. Hate playing against him, but love that guy. But, it's going to be, you'll probably see a lot of, RPOs. I talk about that in my podcast a lot. The Eagles like to run those run pass option plays with Jalen Hurts, which is hopefully going to keep Nick Bosa neutralized because he's not going to be able to bounce outside and take Jalen. They'll hand it off. He's not going to be able to crash down on the running back. Jalen will pull it and either run or throw the ball deep. But that's what I'm looking forward to see too. It's, can they get these long balls? Can they get these big plays to these speedy wide receivers? We're going to see what happens on Sunday, but I think they will.
It's fair. There's definitely a lot of questions in this cornerback room, especially if you don't know if Mosley's going to be going. We lose Verrett. You got Diamador Lenore potentially running out there as a rookie, getting really tested here, as well as, as Ant brought up, Josh Norman, or who knows what they're doing with Drake Kirkpatrick if this guy's going to actually get a run this week. It's just really hard to tell right now. It's way too early in the week. But you did bring up an interesting point, and that was the 49ers D-line and the O-line for the Eagles. Can they handle... Do you think they can handle everything the Niners defensive line can throw at this O-line? Because you talked about Bosa. Ford is looking like he's healthy, getting a lot more snaps than I anticipated. I know more than Ant anticipated as well. Samson Ebukam in the mix as well. And if Javon Kinlaw is healthy to go this week, that's a whole nother aspect to this D-line that gets thrown into the mix that wasn't there last week, that the Eagles, right, aren't going to have any film on of watching what rotation the Niners put out there. Are you worried about this 49ers defensive line? Do you think you guys could handle the defensive line? And if so, what areas of the game do you think you'd have the most success in?
Yeah, so last year, the Eagles offensive line could never stay healthy. I think they set a record. They had 14 different combinations on the offensive line last year. It was just a disaster. Yeah, disaster. And they gave up 65 sacks. I mean, it was really, that's what had the ripple effect throughout the whole team, and that's why they were so bad. But this year, all their guys are healthy. So you got Lane Johnson at right tackle. You got Brandon Brooks, another all-pro at right guard. Jason Kelsey, who's still doing it at center. You got Isaac Sayumala. I always say his name wrong. Isaac Sayumala at left guard. And then there's a guy I'm real excited about at left tackle, Jordan Myelata. I don't know if you guys know him. He was in the Australian Football League for a while.
Started playing football two years ago, correct?
Yeah, he never had played. They drafted him in the 7th round. I think it was 3 years ago. And he's kind of been a work in progress. But everyone's excited about him. The Eagles just gave him a real big contract extension. So if this offensive line can stay healthy, I think they probably have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Now, if they stay healthy, some of these guys are older. Can they neutralize your defensive line? I guess it depends on what we consider neutralized, because I do think Bosa is still going to get his pressures. I still think your defensive line will probably be able to get into the backfield and cause some disruption. But what happened last week is that every time Atlanta put some pressure on Jalen Hurts, because of his ability to escape the pocket and extend plays, it really didn't matter. He only had 1 sack all game. So I do think San Francisco is going to have a little bit of a hard time dealing with Jalen Hurts. Now, one of the things that'll probably help you is they're practicing against Trey Lance, who also has the ability to do that stuff. So, they're probably going to be ready for it and used to it. But I think, like I said earlier, the Eagles will probably run some RPOs to try to neutralize the defense a little bit. They'll probably do what they did last week against Atlanta, some quick passes, some wide receiver screens, some slant routes. And I don't think you'll see Jalen taking some real deep drops against this team and just sitting in the pocket. They'll probably get him on the move, probably roll him out to try to get out of that defensive line. Because you guys know better than me, but I think that's probably the strength of your defense as well, is that D-line.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that defensive line absolutely gets after it. They ran some defensive fronts last week that was completely NASCAR-ish, where they just have every single speed rusher they have in there, and they move Armstead inside with Ebukam, D Ford, and Bosa, and they're just getting after it. They're going after you. They're trying to use the 4 guys, only rush 4, not blitz a lot. Where they had to use the blitz was in stopping the run, and you had Sanders and you had Kenny Gainwell having a lot of success running on Atlanta. I'm curious if you think that is an area where the Eagles can be successful. The 49ers struggled against Detroit, stopping that interior run. Can the Eagles do it again and run against the 49ers defense on the inside and make them use run blitzes, make them bring safeties into the box, which would then give advantage to you guys to be able to go down the field and take those shots. Is that an area you think they can duplicate from last week?
You would hope so. Again, we have a new coach in Nick Sirianni, so we're still learning his offense and learning exactly what he's going to bring to the table. None of the starters played in the preseason, really, so it was hard to understand what type of offense he's going to run. But if you look back at he was the offensive coordinator in Indianapolis. They like to establish the run. One of the complaints Eagles fans always had about Doug Peterson, our former coach, was there was no balance to the offense at all. We threw the ball 75% of the time. Last week was pretty even. It was 35 passes, 31 rushes. So I do think they're going to want to try to establish the run. We'll see if they're able to do it. But Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott really didn't play much last week, but they have running backs who are capable of running outside and running in between the tackles. Miles Sanders is a really good player. I mean, he was overshadowed at Penn State because of Saquon Barkley. And then he comes to Philadelphia, and Doug Peterson just didn't really like to feed him the ball. So I think if he gets his touches, he's a real hard guy to contain. And he has the ability to really hit a home run every time he touches the ball. He had 2 real long runs last year. I think both were over 80 yards for touchdowns. I mean, he has the ability every time he touches it, watch out. So I do think they're going to try to establish the run, but we'll see whether or not they're able to do it against that D-line.
My question would be, I saw when I was watching that game film, watching Eagles Atlanta, I saw a lot of outside zones being run, more outside zones than trying to establish inside. The 49ers struggled against Detroit with that interior. Would you expect to see a little bit more interior run action this week than them sticking with that outside look?
You would think so. I mean, our center is Jason Kelce. The guy's an absolute stud. He's been doing this a long time. So you would think they would try to take advantage of his skill set. And then next to him, Brandon Brooks on one side. That's a really good tandem there. So you think they may try to run inside. Part of the reason they ran so many outside zones was because they also have the ability with these really athletic offensive linemen. I mean, all the offensive linemen are very, very athletic. You'll see plays. Jason Kelce at center is pulling. He's getting on the outside. Lane Johnson is a monster, but he used to play quarterback. So he's also an athlete, so he can get on the outside. And then you have Jordan Myelata on the other side, same thing. I don't know if you saw on Jalen Reagor's touchdown in the Eagles game. He got on the outside and absolutely crushed a cornerback. I mean, it looked like an adult blocking a child, and you're dealing with an NFL player. It was outrageous. So, I think they'll probably try to establish a little bit more inside this week, but because of the athletic ability of the offensive line, I think that's why they like to try to get on the outside as well.
Yeah, and I think that is an area that I think the 49ers would like them to do because of the speed of the linebackers. That is actually an area that I think the 49ers would be better off, as if that's kind of a strength on strength, right? The outside zone, speed linebackers versus, and also the checkdowns, like we talked about earlier. You're going to have those linebackers trying to tackle in space. Is that an area that you think the running backs have an advantage? Because, I mean, Gainwell's really shifty, like you talked about Sanders earlier. Do you think they can catch the ball, on these checkdowns from Hurts, take a little bit of pressure off the offensive line, and then have them make plays? Or will the 49ers defense of linebackers, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, and Azeez Al-Shaair, who really stepped up in this game, be able to kind of stop those, rally and make tackles in front of the sticks? I was wondering what you thought about their kind of ability in open space.
Yeah, I mean, these running backs are definitely shifty. You keep mentioning Kenny Gainwell. I mean, they got him in the 5th round out of Memphis, and he looks like he's the real deal. He has that shift ability. He has the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. Again, looking at Nick Sirianni's past in Indianapolis, they had a guy, Nyheim Hines, who could catch the ball out of the backfield. And I think that's the role they're trying to fill with Kenny Gainwell. And so far, he looks like he's going to answer that role. He looks like he's going to be the guy. So, one of the other things they may do, like I said, is with the RPOs, is on Jalen Reagor's touchdown last week, they ran the RPO look, which is going to freeze your linebackers, making it look like he's either going to ride Kenny Gainwell or run outside, and then he pulls it, he throws a quick wide receiver screen. That's a tough play to defend as a linebacker because you don't know where to go. And when you have a guy like Jalen Hurts who can run the football, what are you going to do? You're either going to sit in zone, or if you're in a man coverage, do you consider putting a spy on him because he can run the ball? So I think it's going to be a tough week for your linebackers because there's so many moving parts. And because those wide receivers are so quick, if they can get the ball to them on the outside quickly while the linebackers are still frozen, they make one guy miss, You don't know what could happen. But I do think they'll try to get Miles Sanders. They'll try to get Kenny Gainwell involved, getting them the ball as well. And yeah, they're going to be a tough open field tackle. Those guys are shifty, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a very, very thought out analysis there, and something that 49ers fans definitely need to be keeping an eye on come game time. In this game, though, who do you think are a couple of the impact players for the Eagles that can really kind of shift the tone and maybe even just set the tone, right? Establish control of the game in certain areas where you feel that they need to control. Who are those players that 49ers fans and Eagles fans should be looking for in week 2?
Well, number one, and I mean, it's the most obvious, is the quarterback, Jalen Hurts. There was a lot of question marks going into this offseason. Could he be the guy, after they traded Carson Wentz? There's still question marks. Is he a franchise quarterback? Is he accurate enough? Can he throw the long ball? Well, he's business-like approach. I think he can be the franchise quarterback from a personality perspective. His accuracy, he threw 77% completion rate last week. But what we still haven't seen, and you mentioned it earlier, he never took that shot over the top. So does he have the ability to throw the long ball? That's something that we still have to find out. But I do think he's going to be a big impact player in this game on whether or not he can read, pick up the blitzes. There's going to get pressure. I mean, your defensive line is going to put pressure on him. Can he do what he needs to do to extend these plays? And big one last week was no turnovers. He has to protect the football. You got to win the turnover battle. But that's an obvious one. But some of the others we talked about, I do think Devonta Smith is a guy to watch. This was his first NFL game ever last week. He goes 6 for 71 in the touchdown. And I think you're going to just keep seeing this guy get better and better. And his route running is phenomenal. So if you're banged up in the secondary, I think you're going to have a real hard time defending Devonta Smith. I think you may see him go over 100 yards in this game. And then another guy we keep mentioning is Kenny Gainwell. He's your 2-minute back. He's the guy who's catching the ball out of the backfield. Both those guys had touchdowns last week. You'd like to see the offense lean on them as well. But on the flip side of it is going to be the defensive line. Can now we put pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance or whoever's in the game at the time? Because they keep going back and forth, right? They keep bringing Trey Lance in on some plays as well.
Yes, they do. Yeah, we've coined it the Shanna plan.
That's true.
Shanna plan. Yeah, but can our defensive line get the same type of pressure that they did last week? And the guys who need to be impact players for the Eagles and were last year are the defensive tackles who line up next to Fletcher Cox. Because Fletcher Cox is going to get double teamed, sometimes he even gets triple teamed because he's so damn good. But can Javon Hargrave and Hassan Ridgeway and the rookie Milton Williams, if Fletcher Cox is being double teamed, can they beat their one-on-one? They got to win those one-on-one battles. And if they can, and they can put pressure on these quarterbacks, I think you'll see the Eagles have a lot of success.
Yeah, I think you're right. And especially you're talking about the interior part of the offensive line that they'll be going against is maybe not the most respected in the NFL for the 49ers. You got Laken Tomlinson, Daniel Brunskill, who are, especially Brunskill, considered more of a journeyman. So that is a huge matchup. And Fletcher Cox is just rough to play against. That is also a good point. Do you think that you guys have the edge rushers as well that can get after a Mike McGlinchey at right tackle? Because when Mike McGlinchey is able to just get after the run and get going downhill, he's one of the best in the league as far as run blocking. But when he has to do a straight kick slide and the 49ers run game isn't going so well, he can struggle. Is there a speed guy coming off the edge that can give Mike McGlinchey some problems that the Eagles can bring?
There is. There's a guy who came on strong last year. He's a name. I don't know if you know the name Josh Sweat. So a lot of people are high on him. He started to come on strong at the end of last season. I think he's going to be a double-digit sack guy this year. It's really starting to come together for him. So be on the lookout for him. He has that ability to speed rush. He's been developing some moves where he can cut inside. He's even got the bull rush working a little bit now. So I think he's going to be a handful for your offensive line as well. And then on the other side, Brandon Graham. I mean, another guy who's been doing this a long time, who is an absolute hero in the city of Philadelphia. I don't think that guy will ever pay for a drink in his life after the strip sack of Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. But, he's still doing it at a high level. So those are two guys I think that could cause a lot of fits. I mean, really, this game's probably going to come down to which defensive line puts the most pressure on the other team's quarterback, because that's the strength of both defenses.
Yeah. I mean, that is 100% accurate. And yeah, Brandon Graham, very, very, I almost forgot about Brandon Graham. Started watching the game film of that week 1 game against Atlanta and was just impressed by the things he did. And that nasty hit he laid on Mike Davis in the red zone.
It was a beautiful hit.
He sheds the block, comes right. Davis doesn't even see him coming, man. He just puts it right in his chest.
Yeah, and Davis isn't a small guy. I mean, he's a pretty stocky guy. Graham just trucked him.
It was beautiful.
Yeah,
it was beautiful. I enjoyed watching. I'm not an Eagles fan, but I enjoyed watching. I love it when linebackers are just laying the smack down all over people. But Bill, man, we can't thank you enough for your time. Thank you so much for coming on. Really good insight. And remember, Cutback crew, 49ers fans, Eagles fans who are here. If you've never heard of Bill, you've never been over there, Legal to the Hands Face podcast. Legal Hands to the Face podcast. My apologies there. Clean it up for you. I got you.
No worries, guys. I appreciate you having me. Yeah, Legal Hands to the Face. We're everywhere. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. So I really appreciate you guys having me. And maybe we'll talk again in the playoffs. What do you think?
Oh, that would be great.
We'll set the date aside. We hope to see you guys there. And good luck with everything with your channel and your pod. And hey, this is going to be a fun week too.
Good luck, guys. Thanks again.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was a fun combo, man.
It was. It's very in-depth, and he knew what he was talking about. He knew everything about the Eagles. I think that's what's fun is when you get to really get into it and kind of get down to brass tacks about who's going to play where and where the mismatches and challenges are for each team. And you heard straight from Bill that it's all going to be about that front seven for both teams. You know, which team can do the best. I think what's interesting we were talking about D lines. Both of them have great defensive lines that present troubles for offensive line. The one thing that the 49ers have going over the Eagles, in my opinion, from what I saw, is the linebacker group. We talked about it a little bit about making the catches and rallying, to tackles underneath, ahead of the sticks. But the guys for the Eagles are a little bit different. They don't have Fred Warner. They don't have Dre Greenlaw. So that is an area that I'm still interested to get to even know more about with this Eagles. Maybe an opportunity for the 49ers to make some success there.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely something that you have to consider and look at. That is a weakness on their team that isn't necessarily a weakness over here. And they are also dealing with some injuries as well, right? Their starting safety, I forget his name. His name eludes me.
Marcus Epps.
Epps, that's right. He went out with a concussion. So Epps went out with a concussion. Rodney McLeod wasn't the guy who stepped in and played. It was another gentleman.
It was Kavon Wallace.
Okay,
yeah,
so
a virtually unknown player.
It's different, right? It's odd. It's not something that you're expecting. And so there's questions now, I think, about their secondary. Now
there is 100% questions about the secondary.
Granted, the Eagles' defense looked very good against that Atlanta Falcons, passing attack. They didn't get a lot going, but a lot of that also was that D line able to apply a lot of pressure on Matt Stafford, really kind of lay him out all over the place. He was taking some shots, taking some hits. They weren't really able to get into rhythm. And also, we've talked about this with Atlanta before, and I've mentioned this. When you don't have Julio Jones in that mix, Calvin Ridley and that passing offense don't have that same sort of potent impact. Kyle Pitts not on the field as much as I was expecting him to be. They did not utilize him as a tight end really at all. He was mostly playing as a slot receiver for most of that game. So less weapons offensively. That isn't the case for the San Francisco 49ers.
No, it's not. And besides Darius Slay, there is nobody in that secondary that you're like, oh, wow. I think that's a weakness. Their front seven is going to have to get it done for them, especially that defensive line with the 10-man rotation that we talked about him with a lot. Bill was all about, knowing the ins and outs of that defensive line, and he's not wrong. They are that good.
They are.
And there's going to be big questions for the 49ers on the interior. Can this offensive line stop them? Thank God we got Alex Mack. And then on the outside with, Mike McGlinchey, that's going to be a big question. But if the 49ers can hold them off, we had no sacks last week. If we can hold them off, we have opportunities to win down the field. We have opportunities to win all over the field because Darius Slay is going to do his thing, but he can't cover all these guys. And you're going to have George Kittle that's going to be able to operate in space. I think that as long as this run game is going for the 49ers, they're going to have play action possibilities and they can take advantage of it. But they have to slow up this Eagles defensive line and this defensive pass rush. And if they don't, it's going to be a long day for Jimmy Garoppolo. It's going to be a long day for the 49ers in general. So I am excited about this matchup, and I'm even more excited now that, really, I know that the secondary is not all it should cracked up to be.
Correct.
In that, in fact, it's not even there, really. There's not a whole lot there. So I'm curious how they match up against the 49ers wide receiver group.
It is. It's going to be interesting. We didn't get into that here, but, the big thing for me also is when you look at this Eagles front, yes, against the pass, they were getting a lot of pressure, and they're getting after Matt Ryan, and they were getting in there. But against the run, they didn't fare as well. There was 100 yards rushing almost at the end of the first quarter for the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons, very early on, I watched about the first quarter and about half of the second. I had messaged you and sent you a thing. I said, I don't know how this game gets this out of hand.
Yeah.
I mean, unless Atlanta just shoots himself in the foot, which they do. They 100% do the rest of the way. I was like, I don't see how. They've controlled the ball for so long. Unless there's a bunch of turnovers or Atlanta starts, getting stupid penalties when they're getting some, and then it started piling up and piling up and piling up. And it's like you can't, when you're shooting yourself in the foot as many times as Atlanta did in week 2, it's extremely hard to, keep yourself in the game, let alone climb out of the hole that you're digging for yourself. And the Eagles did everything that they needed to do with Atlanta, giving them those opportunities, giving them short fields, not capitalizing in the red zone, not capitalizing on 3rd and shorts and things of that nature. But I'll tell you what, I do have questions about the Eagles' ability to slow down a run game. And I mean, let's be real here. I would argue that San Francisco's run game is significantly better than what they have in Atlanta. So that bodes well in San Francisco's favor heading into this week 2 matchup.
Yeah, it does. And, the Eagles' defensive line made Matt Ryan look old.
Yeah.
They really did. Matt Ryan was struggling. He looked uncomfortable the whole entire time. And it got worse as the game progressed because the Eagles were playing from ahead and playing in front. 49ers need to make sure they get ahead early. They need to make sure they're the ones playing, with their foot on the gas, playing ahead of these guys and really pushing the envelope, because having a 10-man rotation on the defensive line means you're going to have fresh guys the entire time. Now, so that means you're going to have to wear these guys down a little bit, establish a run game, which I think Kyle Shanahan really wants to do, especially in this game, because that the defense got tired last week a little bit, playing so many snaps in the second half. They will be in better shape this week because they played last week like that. So it's going to be interesting concepts, interesting things that go on as Kyle Shanahan unveils his game plan in this game. How will he attack them? There's going to be cool, things that he's going to be able to do, which I look forward to getting into even more, because I think Kyle can attack these guys. One of the advantages is when you're dealing with a defense that has a lot of speed on the outside with these defensive ends, you can take advantage of that speed and you can use it against them. And maybe that means a little bit more of an increased role for Trey Lance this week.
Very well could be the case. We could be seeing a little bit more of the Shanna plan. That's something Bill talked about a little bit as well. Let us know what you thought about this. Know your opponent down below in the comment section right now. Make sure you go show Bill some love over there too. Legal Hands to the Face podcast. Newer I think they're only in their 5th episode or so. So, relatively new startup podcast there, but knows his stuff, really diving in well with the Eagles. Oh, very fun conversation. And we're looking forward to more and more Know Your Opponents as the season progresses.
Yeah, nothing but success for that guy. It's coming. Really, really good, that podcast. Very knowledgeable. And that's what I like doing. I like having conversations with, people from other teams that are really knowledgeable. Because I think you can get into it. And now we have a better understanding of the Eagles and how it's viewed from Philly and how they see it. And I'm excited to see this game now. I think there's a lot of cool matchups and a lot of opportunities for both teams to be successful, but especially for our 49ers to be successful and take advantage of that secondary and the linebacker group. Let's see if they can do it.
We're going to see indeed week 2 just around the corner. Cutback crew, thanks for tuning in. And until the next one, stay safe.
Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.